In today's analysis of international defense and trade policies, we are witnessing a dramatic shift that has far-reaching implications for North America and beyond. Recent developments from the defense sector in Canada have brought to the forefront questions about long-standing alliances and trade relationships, particularly with reference to the $13 billion USDF F-35 contract. Canada now appears to be reconsidering its decision to purchase the American-built F-35 fighter jets, a decision that is far more than a routine arms procurement, as it represents a tangible symbol of the cooperation between Canada and the United States. However, growing economic and political tensions, primarily driven by trade imbalances and protectionist policies initiated by former President Donald Trump, have forced the Canadian government to reevaluate its reliance on a single and, at times, unpredictable partner, as Canada contemplates shifting its defense procurement strategy toward a European partner. This historic reconsideration comes at a time when Canada faces mounting pressure due to an array of economic challenges. Since 2017, when Donald Trump began implementing aggressive protectionist trade policies, the relationship between the two neighboring nations has experienced profound strains. The imposition of tariffs on crucial commodities such as steel, aluminum, and agricultural products from Canada has not only hampered the growth of key industrial sectors, but has also amplified Canada's economic vulnerability by deepening its dependence on the United States. The trade barriers and restrictions introduced by the Trump administration, including stringent requirements on agricultural exports and significant tariffs on metals, have pushed Canadian policymakers to question the fairness and sustainability of this asymmetric relationship. Is it really wise for Canada to remain so closely tied to a partner whose policies could potentially undermine its economic stability? Canada's recent agreement to acquire a fleet of 88 new F-35 fighter jets, valued at $199 billion, a historic investment in the Royal Canadian Air Force, described by Defense Minister Anita Anand as the largest in 30 years, serves as a turning point in the nation's military modernization efforts. Defense Minister Anand's announcement underscored the anticipated economic benefits of the deal, citing job creation and technological upgrades as key outcomes. Nonetheless, in light of mounting trade disputes and the ongoing fallout from tariffs imposed by the United States, the decision to proceed with the F-35 purchase has come under intense scrutiny. The $13 billion USDF contract for the F-35 deal has long been seen not merely as an arms procurement, but as a cornerstone of the special relationship between Canada and the U.S. Yet in the current context, Canada is now faced with the crucial decision of whether it is prudent to continue deepening its military and economic ties with a partner known for imposing protectionist measures, or to break off from a relationship that, while long-standing, now appears to entail significant risks for Canada's industries and overall economic security. Throughout this period of uncertainty, it is impossible to ignore the broader implications of the trade tensions that have emerged. The U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and agricultural products have inflicted severe damage on not only the manufacturing and export sectors in provinces such as Ontario and Quebec, but also on the agricultural community, which has seen its margins shrink dramatically due to restrictions on exports of key products like milk and beef. This economic pressure is further compounded by the fact that a significant portion of Canada's industrial output depends on unfettered access to the American market. As Canada deliberates whether to abandon the F-35 contract in favor of European alternatives, it must also confront difficult questions about the long-term viability of its economic model and the need to diversify its alliances. In a twist of fate that might invoke a wry smile from even the most seasoned political analysts, it would appear that Canada is contemplating a breakup with the U.S., a breakup that is as messy as any Hollywood divorce, albeit with national security and economic independence at stake rather than matters of the heart. At the same time, the repercussions of these trade policies have not been contained to defense procurement alone. The retaliatory measures taken by Canada, including the imposition of tariffs on a wide range of U.S. products amounting to $2.7 billion, have had ripple effects across multiple sectors of the U.S. economy. Industries such as automotive manufacturing, consumer goods, and energy have all felt the sting as the supply chain disruptions and rising costs drive up prices and squeeze profit margins. For example, the U.S. auto industry, which heavily relies on Canadian steel and aluminum, 80% of which is sourced from Canada, now faces the prospect of additional costs that could result in a Ford F-150 rising in price by $400 to $600. Ford itself is grappling with potential extra costs of $1.2 billion per year, while General Motors may have to absorb an extra $800 million annually. Even Tesla is not immune, with projections suggesting that increased aluminum costs could translate into an extra $1,000 per unit. The irony here is palpable. Tariffs that were intended to protect domestic industries are now threatening to inflate costs for consumers, a development that would likely prompt a collective groan, reminiscent of the reaction one might have to an unexpectedly high restaurant bill. The economic confrontations extend to the energy sector as well, with one of Canada's most damaging moves being its strategy to block U.S. coal exports through British Columbia ports. Annually, 11.7 million tons of U.S. thermal coal, valued at over $1.5 billion, are exported via Canada, with a staggering 65% of these exports destined for Asian markets, providing crucial revenue for American coal companies. This strategic blockade against U.S. exports, particularly at a time when key markets like China, Japan, and South Korea depend heavily on Canadian ports, threatens to escalate transportation costs significantly by at least 30%. Such an increase not only jeopardizes the market share of American coal companies vis-a-vis competitors from countries like Australia and Indonesia, but also threatens the economic stability of regions such as Montana and Wyoming, which could witness losses exceeding $500 million per year due to declining coal exports. In coal-dependent regions, the potential loss of thousands of jobs highlights just how interwoven the fates of these nations have become in this turbulent economic landscape. Meanwhile, the escalating trade dispute has spurred retaliatory economic measures that are reshaping bilateral trade relations. The Canadian government, in its countermeasures, has not limited itself to the imposition of tariffs alone. It has also pursued strategic economic realignments across various levels. For instance, provinces like Ontario have taken the bold step of banning U.S. liquor from government-regulated retail systems, directly impacting iconic brands such as Jack Daniel's and Jim Beam. Other provinces, like Quebec, have prioritized domestic suppliers in an effort to reduce dependency on U.S. imports, while Alberta has diversified its supply chain by seeking alternatives from regions such as the EU, Japan, and South Korea. These measures collectively aim to curtail the influence of U.S. goods and insert a degree of economic independence into the Canadian market. On the U.S. side, the impact is stark. Rising costs in the auto sector, a threatened supply chain, and disastrous potential consequences for industries that rely heavily on a steady influx of Canadian materials. It is worth pausing for a moment to reflect on the sheer magnitude of these developments. In an ironic twist that might prompt a brief chuckle, if tariffs had a face, one might say that the U.S. auto industry is currently experiencing the economic equivalent of a midlife crisis, forcing companies to make drastic changes while consumers are left wondering if their beloved vehicles will soon require financing just to buy a gallon of gas. Such quips aside, the numbers speak for themselves. Economic analysts have warned that if the trade war drags on, U.S. car prices could experience an increase between 5 to 10% in 2025 alone. This scenario has the potential to not only alter the structure of the U.S. economy, but also to induce broader economic instability that may ultimately result in a recession. The situation takes on an even more dramatic dimension when viewed through the lens of broader international relations. The U.S. trade war is not an isolated phenomenon. It is part of a larger pattern of protectionist measures that have led to a massive tariff storm totaling approximately $60 billion as major countries clash over increasingly aggressive trade policies. In response to Trump's initial decision to impose a 25% tariff on aluminum and steel, countries like Canada and the European Union have not hesitated to enact substantial retaliatory tariffs. The EU, for example, has levied tariffs worth $28 billion on a range of U.S. products, spanning from automobiles and wine to agricultural items. This move by the European Union is not only a direct economic countermeasure, but also a signal of its strategy to reduce reliance on the U.S. market, thereby charting a more autonomous path for its own economic future. These retaliatory measures have had immediate and visible effects. Data released by the World Trade Organization, WTO, indicates that U.S. exports to major partners such as the EU and Canada have seen a significant drop just 1 month after the tariffs were imposed. Moreover, U.S. steel production witnessed an 8% decline in the first quarter of 2025, the steepest decrease in the past 5 years. Such figures underscore the economic cost of these policies, as U.S. businesses, particularly those involved in steel and aluminum manufacturing, grapple with skyrocketing material costs and stiff competition from abroad. The uncertainty has not only shaken investor confidence, as evidenced by the considerable drop in the U.S. stock market, the S&P 500 index experiencing a 12% decline and the Dow Jones falling by 10% in recent months, but has also directly impacted the everyday American consumer. As prices for consumer products from automobiles to electronics surge by between 5% and 15%, the cumulative effect on middle-income families is both profound and worrisome. Despite these downturns, economic forecasts suggest that there is still a window of opportunity for corrective measures. Negotiations between the U.S. and its international partners continue, and there is a glimmer of hope that fairer, more balanced trade agreements could eventually stabilize both the domestic and global economic landscapes. Nevertheless, this optimistic scenario is contingent upon significant policy adjustments and a shift towards a more sustainable long-term strategy, rather than relying on short-term fixes. The overarching question remains: can the United States overcome the current tariff storm? And is it possible for its economic recovery to outpace the challenges posed by these aggressive trade policies? What is particularly compelling is that the answers to these questions will undoubtedly play a crucial role in shaping the global economy, influencing everything from the cost of consumer goods to the stability of international alliances. For those watching, if you find this intricate interplay of defense policies, economic strategies, and international diplomacy as fascinating as we do, be sure to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might offer fresh insights into these complex developments. Amid the swirling economic and political currents, the headlines have taken an even more surreal turn, with comments coming directly from former President Donald Trump. In a high-profile press conference at the White House, Trump made a series of shocking statements that have since sent ripples through international relations and public discourse alike. Among these, his declaration that he intends to annex Canada and take over Greenland stands out as perhaps the boldest claim of all. According to Trump, the United States would benefit immensely from viewing Canada as a state rather than an independent nation. He argued that merging the two countries would create one of the greatest states in history, on the grounds that the border separating the two nations is merely an artificial construct. This perspective, however, overlooks the deep-seated history and robust identity of Canada as an independent country, one that prides itself on its self-governance and strong economy. Needless to say, the proposal to annex Canada has been met with incredulity by experts and citizens alike. After all, if the U.S. were to annex Canada, who would then be responsible for deciding which hockey team reigns supreme in the Great White North? Trump's assertions did not stop with Canada. He further directed his attention towards Greenland, suggesting that its strategic position in the Arctic and its abundance of rare earth minerals, which are critical for modern technology, justify a realignment of U.S. security interests. His remarks about Greenland and his open discussion of using NATO as a means to further these ambitions have raised serious concerns about the potential recalibration of alliances in the region. Historically, in 2019, Trump had already floated the idea of buying Greenland from Denmark, only to be met with swift dismissal. Now, with his renewed focus on Greenland and with the mention of NATO's involvement, questions arise as to whether these statements are anything more than attention-grabbing rhetoric, or if they signal an underlying strategic ambition with implications that could stretch far beyond the realm of defense procurement. The audacity of suggesting that the strategic value of Greenland outranks long-established alliances and economic relations is as perplexing as it is dramatic, giving rise to both bemusement and concern among international observers. Adding to the unfolding drama, Trump also addressed another contentious issue: his approach to managing social controversies. During the same press conference, he admitted that he deliberately manipulates voter sentiment using polarizing social issues. In one memorable moment, he revealed that he encourages debates over topics like men competing in women's sports, remarking, "I told Republicans don't bring it up now, just drop it a week before the election." This statement, delivered with a mix of nonchalance and calculated timing, was intended to distract from more substantive matters and to secure voter support on issues that are emotionally charged rather than politically constructive. It is a strategy that underlines a broader pattern in his approach to public policy, leveraging divisive social controversies for political gain rather than addressing core economic or strategic challenges head-on. These declarations have not only stirred domestic debate, but also raised serious questions about the implications for broader U.S. alliances. When Trump criticized the European Union, labeling it as very nasty and unfair to America, he not only alienated potential allies, but also cast doubts on the future of transatlantic cooperation. His comments imply that instead of reinforcing NATO's traditional mission of collective defense and security, the alliance might be coerced into serving as an extension of his personal geopolitical ambitions. This stance is particularly worrisome given that, alongside the defense procurement issues and trade disputes, the United States is facing intense pressure from both domestic and international fronts. Economic indicators, such as the dramatic plunge of the Dow Jones by over 3.5% in the final week as the trade war escalated between the U.S. and the EU, reflect an economy caught in the crosshairs of conflicting policies. The imposition of a staggering 200% tariff on European wine and champagne by the Biden administration, an ostensibly retaliatory measure against a 50% tariff on American whiskey, has further compounded market instability. Ironically, while the U.S. produces negligible quantities of champagne, the policy has ensured that American consumers will ultimately pay more for their foreign-sourced celebratory beverages. One might muse that if economic policies were cocktails, this mix would be one with an unexpectedly high percentage of sting, leaving a bitter aftertaste for all involved. The ramifications of these decisions extend to nearly every facet of American life. For consumers, rising prices have become an all-too-familiar reality. The impact of increased raw material costs trickles down from the factory floor to the checkout counter, affecting everything from the price of cars to everyday household goods. Major corporations have reported a decline in consumer spending. Walmart, McDonald's, Costco, Target, Foot Locker, Lowe's, and Macy's are all witnessing a downturn, with overall retail sales falling by 2.4% in the last quarter. These trends are particularly worrisome for middle-income families, who are already feeling the pinch of a tightening budget as inflation pressures mount. Economic forecasters predict that, without a strategic shift in policy, the cumulative effects could precipitate a recession by the last quarter of 2025, a scenario that would have devastating implications for job creation, consumer confidence, and the overall vibrancy of the U.S. economy. Yet amid this swirl of dire predictions, there remains a persistent undercurrent of hope that a resolution might yet be in sight. Negotiations between the United States and its international trade partners continue, and there is cautious optimism that fairer trade agreements could eventually restore balance and stabilize both domestic and global economies. However, this optimistic outlook is heavily dependent on whether policymakers are willing to undertake a genuine reassessment of existing tariff policies and engage in proactive diplomacy. The situation highlights a broader lesson about the interdependency of modern economies, where the actions of one nation can reverberate across continents and fundamentally alter the dynamics of global trade. As the economic standoff between Canada and the United States deepens, it also brings to light another uncomfortable truth: the vulnerability of regions that have long depended on a single export market or trade policy. The Canadian public, increasingly vocal in their support for diversifying international relationships, argues that continued reliance on an unpredictable U.S. partner is no longer tenable. In provinces like Ontario and Quebec, where industries are heavily reliant on steel and aluminum exports to the U.S., and where agricultural products such as milk and beef face crippling tariffs, the economic risks are too severe to ignore. Similarly, American industries that have flourished under the assumption of steady, low-cost access to Canadian raw materials are now grappling with the shock of rising production costs and the attendant loss of competitiveness in the global market. The ripple effects are profound. If trade imbalances persist and worsen, Both nations could be forced to contend with an economic downturn that might leave lasting scars on their industrial base and consumer markets alike. In this intricate interplay between international defense, trade policies, and diplomatic maneuvering, one question stands out above all. What is the future of North American economic and strategic relationships? Is Canada poised to sever the long-standing ties with the United States in favor of a more diversified and economically stable approach, particularly by turning to European partners for its next generation of fighter jets? Or will the deep-rooted historical, economic, and military bonds that have long tied the two nations ultimately prevail, despite the growing strains and contentious trade policies? And what impact will these decisions have on the broader fabric of not only local economies, but also international alliances? Observers note that the challenges facing both the United States and Canada are emblematic of a larger global trend, a move toward rethinking entrenched alliances and relying less on any one partner, no matter how long-standing the relationship might be. In an era defined by rapid geopolitical shifts, trade wars, and economic protectionism, the need for a more diversified and resilient approach to both national defense and economic policy has never been more apparent. The battle lines are drawn not simply along national boundaries, but also within the industries that drive vital sectors of the economy. As strategic recalibrations continue to unfold, this development serves as a stark reminder that globalization, with all its benefits, also carries inherent risks that cannot be ignored indefinitely. The unfolding story of Canada's potential pivot from the U.S.-built F-35 contract to a European alternative is a critical chapter in this broader narrative. It embodies the tension between maintaining traditional alliances and adapting to a rapidly changing global landscape that increasingly demands economic self-sufficiency and diversified partnerships. The decision, if finalized, will reverberate through the corridors of defense establishments, trade committees, and even the daily lives of ordinary citizens on both sides of the border. It forces policymakers and citizens alike to confront the uncomfortable reality that strategic alliances, once considered unassailable, must be continually reassessed in light of evolving economic realities and shifting power dynamics. Before we conclude this detailed report, we sincerely encourage you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already, as staying informed on these complex issues is more important now than ever. Your engagement matters, so please like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Do you believe Canada's shift toward European defense partnerships is the right move? Or should the long-standing ties with the United States be preserved despite the economic headwinds? Your opinions could shine a light on aspects of this debate that we might not have fully considered yet. The delicate balancing act between national security and economic prosperity has reached a critical juncture. With Canada's historic decision looming and the aggressive trade policies of the Trump era and their lingering effects reshaping the global economic landscape, the stakes could not be higher. Every decision taken in the coming months will have cascading consequences, not only for defense procurement and industrial stability, but also for the overall geopolitical climate. The prospect of a prolonged trade war, coupled with volatile market reactions and the uncertainty of international alliances, paints a picture of an economic future that is as unpredictable as it is fraught with risk. Looking at the broader implications, it becomes evident that if either side, be it Canada or the U.S., fails to adapt its strategies to the shifting global order, the consequences could be dire. From skyrocketing vehicle costs due to increased raw material expenses, to the potential collapse of critical exports in sectors reliant on international supply chains, the economic fallout could be both profound and widespread. For instance, disruptions in the U.S. coal industry alone, where coal exports valued at over $1.5 billion annually are at risk due to Canada's blockade strategy, could ultimately lead to job losses numbering in the thousands and inflict additional financial strain on already vulnerable local economies. Moreover, the symbolic nature of the F-35 deal itself should not be underestimated. Beyond its immediate economic and defense-related benefits, the contract has long been seen as a monument to the close ties binding Canada and the United States. The prospect of canceling or even renegotiating such a critical agreement poses significant questions regarding the future of the so-called special relationship. It is as if the time has come for both nations to ask themselves whether age-old alliances can truly endure in an era dominated by rapid economic shifts and unpredictable political climates. One might quip, if alliances were as adaptable as smartphone apps, perhaps we would have seen this coming sooner. At the same time, the broader repercussions of these policy shifts extend well beyond the realm of defense and trade. The economic shockwaves produced by rising tariffs, the destabilization of major industries, and the erosion of investor confidence have contributed to a broader climate of uncertainty within the United States. With the S&P 500 index taking a 12% hit and the Dow Jones tumbling by 10% recently, domestic markets are reeling under the combined pressures of an increasingly protectionist trade regime and the retaliatory measures implemented by international partners. The cumulative effect of these developments is a tangible anxiety that permeates every corner of the American economy, from the boardrooms of major corporations to the everyday budgets of middle-income families. In light of these uncertainties, analysts have cautioned that without a decisive shift in trade policies, the United States stands at the precipice of an economic recession. This looming risk is underscored by projections suggesting that the U.S. economy could experience a contraction of up to 2% in 2026 if the current trajectory of trade disputes remains unaltered. Such a scenario would not only result in higher prices for consumers, but could also lead to significant layoffs and a steep decline in consumer spending. The harsh reality is that the economic fallout could ultimately influence everything from the availability of jobs to the capacity of local governments to fund essential public services, all issues that resonate deep into the everyday lives of millions. As we continue to monitor these unfolding events, the intersection of trade, defense, and diplomacy remains a critical focal point for scholars, policymakers, and everyday citizens alike. In our quest for clarity amid the economic turbulence, it is essential to acknowledge that such massive policy shifts rarely occur in isolation. Instead, they represent the convergence of multiple factors, including the interplay of domestic politics, international diplomacy, and the volatile dynamics of global economics. The Canadian government's decision regarding the F-35 contract and its potential realignment with European partners is not simply a matter of choosing between two defense systems. It is emblematic of a broader strategy to assert national independence and redefine existing geopolitical alliances in a rapidly evolving world order. It is also important to note that these developments have spurred a broader debate among economists, political analysts, and industry experts about the long-term ramifications of the ongoing trade war. While some experts maintain that a diversified approach to international trade is necessary for ensuring economic resilience, others caution that the immediate disruptions caused by such sweeping policy changes might lead to unforeseen consequences. As American automakers, coal companies, and steel manufacturers grapple with rising production costs, the question persists: who will ultimately bear the brunt of these measures? The domestic industries that have long relied on international cooperation, or the investors and consumers who are left holding the bag? The prospect of such large-scale economic dislocation is a sobering reminder of the unpredictable nature of modern geopolitics. In considering the ramifications of these complex issues, it is essential to maintain a balanced perspective that weighs both the potential benefits and the inherent risks involved. On one hand, diversifying trade partnerships and modernizing the defense capabilities of Canada could yield substantial economic and strategic benefits in the long term. On the other hand, disrupting established trade relationships carries its own set of challenges, ranging from immediate price increases for critical consumer goods to the destabilization of major industrial sectors that have long been the bedrock of North American economic prosperity. This dual-edged reality means that every decision must be scrutinized meticulously, not only by policymakers, but also by the public, whose daily lives are inextricably linked to these broader economic trends. The unfolding narratives surrounding Canada's shift away from the U.S.-built F-35 deal, the retaliatory tariffs imposed by both sides, and the rebellious rhetoric emanating from Trump's press conferences collectively form an intricate tapestry of modern economic and defense policy. Each thread in this tapestry represents a facet of a larger debate about national sovereignty, international trade fairness, and the limits of traditional alliances in an era marked by rapid change. In this context, the possibility that these developments might ultimately lead to a substantial realignment of alliances and economic policies is a prospect that warrants careful consideration and indeed rigorous analysis. For those following these developments, one cannot help but wonder about the future trajectory of these intertwined relationships. Will the United States and Canada find a way to reconcile their differences and forge a new, more equitable partnership? Or will the escalating trade tensions and protectionist measures force both nations into a prolonged period of economic instability and strategic divergence? As we look ahead, these questions not only captivate the attention of experts and market analysts, but also resonate with the everyday concerns of citizens on both sides of the border. In conclusion, the unfolding events, from Canada's potential cancellation of the $13 billion USDF F35 contract to the explosive trade disputes and provocative statements by Donald Trump, present a complex and deeply interconnected narrative that encapsulates the challenges and opportunities of our modern geopolitical landscape. The intertwined fates of nations, industries, and consumers serve as a stark reminder that in today's high-stakes global arena, the decisions made by a few can have monumental repercussions for many. As we continue to monitor these developments, it becomes clear that the path forward will require not only strategic agility and visionary policymaking, but also a collective willingness to adapt to an ever-changing economic reality. Now, before you move on, we invite you once again to join our community of informed viewers. If you appreciate deep dives into these pressing issues, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing your insights in the comments. How do you view the current trade tensions and defense policy recalibrations between Canada, the US, and even the EU? And what impact do you think these shifts will have on the global economy? Your opinions are not only valued, they might just help spark the next big discussion on these critical topics. As we reflect on the dramatic interplay of policy, economics, and international relations, one observation remains clear. Every action, every tariff, and every provocative statement forms an intricate puzzle that shapes the future. Whether it is the cancellation of a landmark defense deal, the escalation of retaliatory tariffs, or a high-profile announcement from a polarizing figure like Donald Trump, the underlying dynamics of power, influence, and economic survival are at work. The stakes are undeniably high, not just for the governments involved, but for the millions of individuals whose everyday lives hinge on the stability and growth of their respective economies. In this evolving scenario, the world watches with bated breath as Canada stands at the crossroads of tradition and transformation. The decision to either maintain a long-established, yet increasingly fraught, alliance with the United States or opt for a more diversified and independent course by partnering with European allies is emblematic of a broader struggle for national identity and economic self-determination. Each choice carries with it a distinct set of risks and rewards, and the outcome will undoubtedly redefine the geopolitical landscape for years to come. While policy experts and economists continue to debate the merits of various approaches, from protectionism to global integration, the lived reality for many remains unchanged. Rising costs, uncertain job prospects, and an ever-present tension between the ambitious visions of policymakers and the practicalities of everyday life. It is in this context that we are compelled to ask, can the United States recalibrate its trade policies in time to avert an economic meltdown? Or will the aggressive tariff strategies and internal divisions ultimately usher in a prolonged period of recession? And what of our northern neighbors? Is Canada's pivot towards European defense partnerships reflective of a broader desire for economic independence? Or is it simply a reaction to temporary geopolitical pressures that might soon subside? Despite the gravity of these questions, there remains a certain irony in the situation, almost as if the global economic stage is set for a Shakespearean drama, complete with acts of betrayal, declarations of war, and unexpected twists that leave audiences both shocked and strangely entertained. Perhaps the only thing missing is a witty aside or two from the cosmic narrator, reminding us all that in the grand play of international relations, even the most carefully constructed strategies can sometimes unravel in the most unexpected ways. In the end, the debate over Canada's F-35 acquisition, the subsequent trade measures between Canada and the United States, and the provocative policy proposals aimed at redefining the international order are not just isolated incidents. They are interconnected chapters in an ongoing story of global interdependence and economic recalibration. As nations navigate these treacherous waters, the choices made today will echo for generations, affecting everything from national security and industrial prosperity to consumer prices and social stability. While the final outcome remains uncertain, one thing is clear. The era of unilateral dominance is giving way to a more complex, multipolar world where cooperation, flexibility, and a willingness to adapt are the keys to survival. We now reach a pivotal moment in this unfolding saga, one that directly challenges conventional wisdom and compels us to reconsider the nature of international partnerships in a rapidly changing global economy. How will Canada's decisive pivot, if it comes to pass, influence not only its own future, but also that of its allies and adversaries alike? Can the United States recover from the economic setbacks imposed by its own protectionist policies? Or will it be forced to confront a future defined by diminished global influence and fractured alliances? These are not merely academic questions. They are issues that have real-life implications for millions of people across continents. As we look to the horizon, it remains incumbent upon us to watch closely, analyze critically, and engage in meaningful dialogue about these momentous issues. The interdependencies between defense, trade, and domestic policy are more apparent than ever. And the decisions being made in boardrooms, government halls, and international summits today will undoubtedly shape the landscape of tomorrow. We encourage you to think deeply about these connections and to share your own views on what lies ahead in the comments section below. Is the current trajectory sustainable, or are we hurtling towards an unavoidable economic reckoning? Your voice in this conversation is vital. In summary, the current events, marked by Canada's dramatic reconsideration of the $13 billion USDF F35 contract, the far-reaching effects of U.S. tariffs on critical industries, and the provocative assertions from Donald Trump about annexing Canada and targeting Greenland, illustrate a period of unprecedented change and uncertainty in global defense and economic policy. These complex, interwoven narratives underscore the vulnerability of long-standing alliances in the modern era, as geopolitical, economic, and diplomatic forces converge in ways that challenge traditional paradigms. Only time will tell whether these seismic shifts will lead to a more balanced and diversified international order, or whether they will usher in a new era of instability and confrontation. Regardless of the outcome, the stakes could not be higher. The decisions made in the near future will determine not only the fate of international defense arrangements and trade relations, but will also have a profound impact on everyday lives, from the price of vehicles and consumer goods to the availability of jobs and the overall health of our economies. It is a delicate dance of power and policy, one in which every step carries immense responsibility and every misstep threatens to send ripples across the globe. As we conclude this detailed examination of the ongoing trade war and its attendant diplomatic and economic consequences, we urge you once again to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and join the conversation by leaving your thoughts in the comments below. After all, in a world where every decision counts and every policy has far-reaching implications, your perspective could help shape a more informed public discourse. What do you think is the better path forward? Continuing the alliance with the United States despite its protectionist tendencies, or forging a new direction with European partners? We eagerly await your opinions. In these challenging times, the interplay of strategy, economics, and international relations serves as a poignant reminder that the global order is in a state of constant flux. The decisions of today will reverberate through the corridors of power and the daily lives of millions tomorrow. Whether it is the cancellation of a landmark defense contract, the imposition of staggering tariffs, or the outrageous proposals of high-profile figures, every development is a piece of a larger puzzle that we are all striving to understand. With our commitment to unbiased analysis and a passion for uncovering the truth behind the headlines, we remain dedicated to keeping you informed and engaged as these events continue to unfold. Thank you for joining us on this extensive exploration of one of the most consequential geopolitical and economic stories of our time. As you reflect on the issues discussed, ranging from Canada's pivot in defense procurement to the cascading effects of international trade disputes, remember that your voice matters. Share your insights, agree or disagree, and let us know how you envision the future of these critical relationships. In this era of rapid change, staying informed and connected has never been more important.